live in interesting times.
For the headlines.
More than 1,000 people could still be missing after Indonesia's devastating quake tsunami.
DR Congo Dr. Denis Mukwege, who has spent years helping women overcome injuries and trauma of rape, and Yazidi campaigner Nadia Murad are awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their fight against sexual violence in conflicts around the world.
Former South Korean President Lee Myung-bak was jailed for 15 years for corruption.
And the Iglesia Ni Cristo's Aid for Humanity helps thousands in Winnipeg, Canada.
I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
And now to the news. Search teams made desperate last-ditch efforts to find survivors. A week on from Indonesia's devastating quake tsunami, as the death toll from the disaster rose above 1,500. The city of Palu on Sulawesi Island has been left in ruins after being hit by a 7.5 magnitude quake and a wall of water, which flattened homes, ripped up trees, and overturned cars. Now, after days of delays, international aid has finally started to arrive in the disaster zone, where the UN says almost 200,000 people are in need of humanitarian assistance. Survivors have ransacked shops and supply trucks in the hunt for basic necessities, prompting security forces to round up dozens of suspected looters and warn that they will fire on thieves. Authorities previously set a tentative deadline on Friday for finding anyone trapped under ruined buildings, although chances of pulling survivors alive from the rubble at such a late stage are almost zero. Local military spokesman Muhammad Thohir said that the death toll had risen to 1,558, up about 100 from the previous official figure. Search efforts focused on 8 key locations Friday, including a beach and the Balaroa area, where the sheer force of the quake turned the earth temporarily to mush. At the badly damaged Mercure Hotel on Palu's waterfront, there was growing frustration among a French and Indonesian search team.
Il peut y avoir une victime qui est maintenant décédée. Puisqu'hier on avait simplement le signal du rythme cardiaque et de la respiration. Il n'y avait pas d'autres mouvements, donc ça veut dire que c'était quelqu'un qui était vraiment immobile, confiné, et aujourd'hui on n'a plus de signal. On n'est jamais convaincu parce que ce sont des appareils électroniques, donc il peut y avoir beaucoup d'influences. Il y a de la présence de l'eau, il y a le vent, il y a beaucoup de facteurs qui peuvent influencer. Donc on n'est jamais convaincu, on n'annonce pas catégoriquement, et c'est pour ça qu'on est revenu encore ce matin pour retester une nouvelle fois. Mais là le test est négatif.
Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte has revealed that he is awaiting the results of fresh medical tests, adding that if it's cancer, it's cancer. Duterte, 73, is the oldest person ever to be elected president in the country, and speculation about his health has cropped up regularly since he took power in 2016. In a speech late Thursday, the president said he underwent an endoscopy and colonoscopy about 3 weeks ago, but that he was advised this week to repeat the tests.
I had got my, the other, but 3 weeks ago I had my endoscopy and colonoscopy. Then I was about to have a sana ngayong cabinet meeting yesterday, but yung reading ng aking somebody advised my doctor just also to repeat and get some samples there, both dito uli. So I stayed there for 1 hour sa Cardinal Santos. It got worse. I don't know where I'm now physically, but I have to wait for that. But I would tell you that if it's cancer, it's cancer. And if it's third stage, no more treatment. I will not prolong my agony in this office or anywhere.
Meanwhile, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said he might resign from his post as it seemed he has not been up to date with some of the president's affairs. During a briefing Thursday afternoon, Roque said he had no personal knowledge that the president was hospitalized on Wednesday. That's why he skipped an event in Malacanang. He said Duterte just took the day off and that the 73-year-old president's health was fine.
And finally, I've been asked to comment on what the President said in the same affair about me staying put. Knowing the President, I think he was, well, prior to this speech, we had a command conference where the President asked me to stay and offered me a position which currently does not exist yet. No? While there was no categorical agreement on what to do, I did say I will consider it. And I wanted the weekend to think it over. He mentioned it again in the PMA affair, but I think the manner by which he mentioned it was typical Duterte. He cariño brutal, if you need to put it, but I think he has sent the message that he prefers that I stay. What will be my response? I need a weekend. I need to ponder on this point, and although I will say that, like you, I was taken aback about the diagnostic examination. I did not lie to anyone because I simply did not know. And in my decision on whether or not to run or to accept whatever the office the president may have, I will consider the fact that in this capacity as spokesperson, I must know everything about the president. And I do concede that his going to that diagnostic exam was something that I did not know, and therefore I'm inclined to believe that perhaps I am not in a position to continue with his current function. And finally, I've been asked...
If he decides to stay, Roque said he would ask the president to finally clear the air about the state of his health, adding that the president's constitutional obligation is to disclose the state of his health only in case of serious illness.
To other news now, Russian President Vladimir Putin, on a two-day visit to India, has reportedly inked a $5 billion deal for India to procure Moscow's first advanced air defense system, the S-400 Triumph, risking U.S. sanctions. Mr. Putin arrived Thursday and was greeted by Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj at the airport and welcomed by Prime Minister Modi at his residence. India wants S-400 missile systems from Russia to change the strategic balance in the subcontinent. Long-range missile systems will tighten India's air defense capabilities along the 4,000-kilometer-long India-Chair border. The U.S. could impose sanctions using the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, or CAATSA legislation, which deals primarily with countries having significant transactions with Russia, North Korea, or Japan. A plan for Russia building its second nuclear power plant in India is on the table too, as is the training of Indian astronauts in Russia for New Delhi's first crewed space mission in 2022. India's decision to negotiate with Moscow flies in the face of the U.S. imposing sanctions on countries buying Russian military hardware, as happened with China last month.
Western powers accused Russia on Thursday of orchestrating a string of global cyber attacks, including a bungled plot to hack the world's chemical weapons watchdog in the Netherlands. The United States indicted 7 alleged Russian members of the GRU military intelligence agency for targeting the Hague-based OPCW, the U.S. Democratic Party, world sports bodies, and U.S. nuclear energy company Westinghouse.
Thank you all for joining us today as we announce an indictment charging 7 Russian military officers with violations of several U.S. criminal laws for malicious cyber activities against the United States and its allies.
The Russians were tracked by Dutch and British secret services from their arrival in Amsterdam on diplomatic passports in April and were then seen hiring a Citroën car which they parked outside the Marriott Hotel next to the OPCW. When Dutch agents swooped on April 13, they found electronic equipment in the boot and back of the car to intercept the OPCW's Wi-Fi and login codes, including a hidden antenna facing the chemical weapons watchdog.
Although the whole operation sounds like James Bond, there was no James Bond involved. It's really quiet. The guests followed, and there were no handcuffs, there were no police force, nothing. So, unfortunately, no Aston Martins, no revolving number plates, nobody skydiving from the rooftop. It's a very dull James Bond story, for that matter.
Investigations found the Russians had originally taken a taxi from GRU barracks in Moscow to the airport, for which Dutch agents later found a receipt from their hotel. Some of their mobile phones were also activated in Moscow near the agency's headquarters. A laptop belonging to one of the 4 was linked to Brazil, Switzerland, and Malaysia, while the activities in Malaysia were related to the investigation into the 2014 shooting down of flight MH17 over Ukraine. It was also revealed that the agents had made searches for the OPCW-affiliated Spies laboratory in Switzerland, which the Swiss last month said had been targeted by Russia.
En zoals zojuist door de minister is uiteengezet, heeft mijn dienst op 13 april 2018 om 5 uur, half 5 tot kwart voor 5 in de middag, een contra-inlichtingenoperatie uitgevoerd met een verstoring van een operatie van de GRU in Den Haag. Een operatie van de Russische militaire inlichtingendienst die specifiek gericht was op het OPCW.
But this is why the United States, like the United Kingdom, Denmark, the Netherlands, Estonia, will provide national cyber contributions to help NATO fight in this important domain.
And that if they think they can get away with flouting international law, trying to destabilize the way democracies go about their business, sending agents in to use chemical weapons on British soil for the first time in our history, if they think that we're just going to lie down and accept that, they're wrong.
Russia has dismissed the allegations as a coordinated media attack timed to coincide with a NATO meeting on cyber warfare. The Russian ambassador to Britain, Alexander Yakovenko, said that the accusations, together with a lack of proof, are intended to tarnish Russia's reputation. We see a well-coordinated campaign to discredit Russia. Of course, from my point of view, that's unacceptable, he said. Reacting directly to Hunt's accusations, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said the diabolical perfumed cocktail of new allegations must be the product of someone with a rich imagination.
All right, meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin branded former double agent Sergei Skripal a traitor and a scumbag, saying Moscow knew he had cooperated with foreign intelligence after his release in a spy swap. But he again denied any Russian involvement in the poisoning of Skripal, who Britain says was attacked with a Soviet-designed nerve agent by members of Russia's military intelligence in March.
Он просто шпион, предатель Родины. Понимаете, есть такое понятие предатель Родины. Вот просто подонок. Вот и все. Значит, а вокруг этого развернули целую информационную кампанию.
Putin said that Russia has repeatedly urged the UK to provide Moscow with materials on the Skripal case, yet the requests have been squarely ignored. The Kremlin has said that the former double agent poisoned in Salisbury with his daughter Yulia in March after already serving a jail sentence in Russia was of no real interest for Russia. While London keeps blaming Russia for the Skripal incident, it's yet to provide any solid evidence to back up the claims. The Russian Foreign Ministry has sent some 60 notes to London since March, urging the United Kingdom authorities to conduct a joint investigation and provide consular access to the Skripal family. But the United Kingdom has not replied to any of their requests.
Vice President Mike Pence accused China of aggression in areas from security to trade as he portrayed the Asian power as a villain interfering in U.S. elections. Expanding on a theme first aired by President Donald Trump at the United Nations last week, Pence accused China of waging an unprecedented effort to influence American public opinion ahead of critical congressional elections on November 6.
In response to the strong stand that President Trump has taken, Beijing is pursuing a comprehensive and coordinated campaign to undermine support for the President, our agenda, and our nation's most cherished ideals. As we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach to advance its influence and benefit its interests. It's employing this power in more proactive and coercive ways to interfere in the domestic policies of this country and to interfere in the politics of the United States. These and other actions taken as a whole constitute an intensifying effort to shift American public opinion and policy away from the American first leadership of President Donald Trump. But our message to China's rulers is this: this president will not back down.
Relations between the world's two largest economies have plummeted in recent weeks, with Trump slapping $200 billion in tariffs on Chinese goods amid complaints over Beijing's trade policies.
We don't want China's markets to suffer. In fact, we want them to thrive. But the United States wants Beijing to pursue trade policies that are free, fair, and reciprocal, and we will continue to stand and demand that they do. In response to the strong...
He lashed out at China for focusing its retaliatory tariffs on states vital to the Republicans' electoral chances.
And our nation's most cherished ideals.
All right, meanwhile, President Trump shrugged off signs of trouble in midterm congressional elections, telling supporters in Minnesota that his bruising fight to get Brett Kavanaugh onto the Supreme Court will galvanize a surprise victory. Take a look.
This is supposed to be a Democrat state. Surprise coming, don't you think?
Now, polls point to a possible retaking of the House of Representatives by the Democrats on November 6th, with a tough fight for the Senate also in the cards. To cries of "I love you, Donald," he insisted that the extraordinarily bitter struggle over Kavanaugh's Supreme Court confirmation would ignite Republican victory. Kavanaugh's once near-certain confirmation ran into a minefield of sex assault allegations, quickly transforming into a pitched political battle that Democrats believe will hurt Republicans among women and independent voters. But hours after senators in Washington indicated they were nearing a confirmation vote over the weekend, Trump told the nationally televised audience that Democrats had miscalculated.
But all you have to do is look at the polls over the last 3 or 4 days, and it shows that their rage-fueled resistance is starting to backfire at a level that nobody has ever seen before. Democrats have been trying to destroy Judge Brett Kavanaugh. since the very first second he was announced. And he was announced for one simple reason. He is an incredible intellect, an incredible person, an incredible talent.
With the Senate vote poised for as early as this weekend, thousands of people protest outside the Supreme Court in Washington and Trump Tower in New York, with some even occupying the Senate Hart building, all in hopes to prevent Kavanaugh from taking a place on the highest bench in the U.S. Watch this.
I can't believe that someone like this could get nominated to the Supreme Court. Like, this is going to upheaval women's rights for the next couple of decades. I mean, we're in big trouble. I'm very afraid for my future.
In other news, Congolese Dr. Denis Mukwege and Yazidi campaigner Nadia Murad won the 2018 Nobel Peace Prize on Friday for their work in fighting sexual violence in conflicts around the world. Now, the pair won the award for their efforts to end the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war. Nobel Committee Chairwoman Berit Reiss-Andersen said in unveiling the winners in Oslo. Now, both have come to represent the struggle against a global scourge which goes well beyond any single conflict, as the ever-expanding #MeToo movement has shown. Murad, a Yazidi Kurdish human rights activist, was captured by ISIS militants in 2014 and has spoken out about the abuse she suffered at their hands. In November 2017, she published her story in The Last Girl, My Story of Captivity and My Fight Against the Islamic State. Mukwege, meanwhile, a Congolese doctor, has spent his life working with victims of sexual violence in the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Former South Korean President Lee Myung-bak was jailed for 15 years for corruption Friday, becoming the latest of the country's ex-leaders to be convicted of criminal offenses. Lee was found guilty on charges including bribery and embezzlement and ordered to pay a fine of 13 billion won, but that's $11.5 million, by the Seoul Central District Court. The Seoul Central District Court found Lee guilty of embezzlement of about 24.6 billion won from a private auto parts maker headed by his brother, and accepting bribes from Samsung and others, fining him 13 billion won in addition to the jail sentence. Lee, 76, has denied any wrongdoing, saying the investigation that led to the trial was politically motivated, revenge by current President Moon Jae-in, who came to office vowing to clean house after the park scandal and who has previously criticized Lee over an investigation into another former president, Roh Moo-hyun. Mr. Hyun served as Roh's chief of staff, and the two liberal leaders had a close relationship before Roh committed suicide in 2009 after being questioned on corruption allegations during Lee's presidency. Lee was not in court for the verdict, which was televised live. Prosecutors had sought a 20-year sentence.
Meanwhile, the chairman of South Korean retail giant Lotte Group was released from jail on Friday after an appeals court suspended 4 years his sentence in a massive corruption scandal that brought down former President Park Geun-hye. Now, Shin Dong-bin, 63, was jailed for 30 months in February for providing 7 billion won or $6.2 million to a foundation controlled by Park's secret confidant in return for state favors regarding Lottie's duty group business or duty-free business. It is judged that the donation was made with the expectation of some reciprocity, a court statement said, but Shin made the payment passively after a demand from the president, it added, and feared consequences on his business if he declined to do so. Now, Shin was the second head of a top conglomerate to be jailed for seeking to curry favor with Park after Samsung heir Lee Jae-yong was imprisoned for allegedly paying billions of dollars. Lee was also released in February when most of his bribery convictions were set aside on appeal. Lotte, the fifth largest conglomerate in South Korea, began as a chewing gum company in Japan in 1948, but now operates businesses in chemicals, food retail, and hotels. The South Korean economy is dominated by giant family-controlled firms known as chaebol like Lotte, which powered a decades-long economic boom, but have long had murky ties with authorities.
More news will be coming your way when Eagle News International returns.
We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
High commodity prices and the lackluster performance of the economy in the beginning of the year have forced the World Bank to cut its Philippine GDP growth forecast for 2018. In a Philippine economic update briefing on Thursday, World Bank officials predicted that the Philippine GDP growth will only reach 6.5% this year, a 0.2 percentage point reduction from its 6.7% forecast in April. The World Bank said the Philippines' economic growth outlook remains positive, yet downside risks have increased. An expected slowdown in global trade in the medium term is likely to further dampen Philippine exports, the bank said. Nevertheless, it said the baseline economic growth is projected at 6.5% in 2018, 6.7% in 2019, and 6.6% in 2020. It added that the bank said there were considerable risks to the current growth forecasts, including the increasing global uncertainty amid the trade tensions between the U.S. and China and the rising interest rates in the U.S. This could raise external financing costs and further weaken the peso.
All right, Samsung Electronics forecast a record operating profit of 17.5 trillion won, or $15.4 billion in the third quarter, led by solid demand for its memory chips. Sales for July to September are expected to reach 65 trillion won. The world's largest maker of smartphones and memory chips said in a regulatory filing. The earnings forecast from the South Korean electronics giant beat market consensus of about 17.2 trillion won, according to market researcher FN Guide, with analysts expecting a jump in profits on a strong performance by the company's semiconductor unit. Third quarter operating profit was up 20.4% from a year ago, while sales jumped by 4.7%.
France has installed its first floating wind turbine of Saint-Nazaire, a facility that could eventually become an alternative to nuclear energy. Here's more.
Les principaux avantages du flottant, c'est qu'on s'affranchit de la contrainte de profondeur. Donc on peut aller sur des sites où il y a plus de vent. On va typiquement produire 2 fois plus d'électricité avec une éolienne en mer qu'avec une éolienne à terre. On est loin des côtes, on n'a pas d'impact paysager. On est en mer, on ne gêne personne au niveau du bruit, on ne gêne pas la faune non plus. On est sur les sites épouvantés, donc on a un coût de production d'électricité qui est extrêmement compétitif. Et c'est sans doute une des technologies qui est les plus prometteuses dans ce sens-là.
All right, in other tech news, Japanese car giant Toyota said it is recalling more than 2.4 million hybrid cars over a fault that could cause crashes, just a month after another recall affecting hybrids. Take a look. Now, the firm in September said it was recalling more than 1 million hybrid cars globally after uncovering a technical problem that could cause fires. The latest recall affects several models of Toyota's Prius and its Auris hybrid vehicles produced between October 2008 and November 2014, with more than 1 million of the affected cars in Japan. Another 830,000 are in North America, 290,000 in Europe, 3,000 in China, and the rest in other parts of the world. In a statement, Toyota said the cars involved in the recall had already been involved in previous recalls in 2014 and 2015. But the remedy conducted then did not anticipate the new condition identified in this recall. The problem identified arises when the cars fail to enter fail-safe driving mode as intended. Now, if this occurs, the vehicle could lose power and stall, while power steering and braking would remain operational. A vehicle stall while driving at higher speeds could increase the risk of a crash.
Two American astronauts and a Russian cosmonaut returned to Earth Thursday, wrapping up a 6-month mission at the International Space Station as tensions between Washington and Moscow threaten a rare area of cooperation. NASA astronauts Drew Fustel and Ricky Arnold and Leg
and touchdown.
Artemiev of Roscosmos touchdown on Steep Island, southeast of the Kazakh town of Zekazgan at the expected time of 11:45 GMT. The landing is the first since Russian Space Chief Dmitry Rogozin bemoaned problems in the Russian Space Agency's cooperation with NASA that he attributed to interference from unnamed American officials this week. The outspoken official also said Russian investigators believed a small hole that appeared in a Russian spacecraft docked at the orbiting station in August, causing an air leak on the ISS, had been made deliberately. Fusel has called the suggestion that the crew was somehow involved embarrassing, and NASA on Wednesday expressed doubts over the theory that the hole was the result of sabotage. The ISS is one of the few areas of tight Russia-U.S. cooperation that remains unaffected by the crisis in ties, including after Washington's sanctions against Russia over Ukraine and other crises.
Completing a year of education on station was just a spectacular first.
All right, we're going for another break. The news continues here on Eagle News International.
Stay with us.
Pamilya ang responsableng panonood. Teamwork tayo, parents!
Rated G, good for all. Oops, rated PG.
Dapat may mga magulang para sagutin ang mga tanong ng kabataan.
Grabe, rated SPG, maselan.
Higpitan ang paggabay.
Pag rated MTRCB, rated responsable.
All right, welcome back. More than 1,000 people could still be missing or buried after Indonesia's devastating quake tsunami, according to officials, drastically upping the total number of people unaccounted for a week after the disaster. Take a look. Now, Palu City on Sulawesi Island has been left in ruins after it was hit by a powerful quake and a wall of water which flattened houses and flipped over cars, with the confirmed death toll now standing at more than 1,500. Fears are growing that vast numbers of people have been buried in a massive government housing complex at Balaroa, where the sheer force of the quake turned the earth temporarily to mush. Officials had previously estimated that around 100 people were missing. Now, after days of delays, international aid has finally started to arrive in the disaster zone, where the UN says almost 200,000 people are in need of humanitarian assistance. Survivors have ransacked shops and supply trucks in the hunt for basic necessities. Now, that prompted security forces to round up dozens of suspected looters, and they warned that they will open fire on thieves. Authorities previously set a tentative deadline of Friday for finding anyone trapped under the ruined buildings, although the chances of pulling survivors now that are alive from the rubble at such a late stage are almost zero.
Here are the latest numbers in Indonesia's quake tsunami disaster. So far, Indonesian authorities have counted 1,558 dead from the double disaster on Sulawesi Island, while 2,549 people are seriously injured. Some 618 victims have already been buried in mass graves as authorities race to prevent an outbreak of disease from rotting corpses, while 921 bodies had been returned to their families. Rescuers are searching for 152 people still believed to be trapped under rubble and 113 unaccounted for, as the government's tentative deadline for finding any more survivors ticks down. But fears are growing that about 1,000 people may have been buried in a massive government housing complex at Balaroa, where the sheer force of the quake temporarily turned the earth to mush. Among the survivors, 70,821 people have been displaced and are now being housed in about 140 locations. The race is on to get them food and other essential supplies, but the scale of the problem may be much bigger than that. The United Nations Disaster Relief Agency has warned that almost 200,000 people are in need of humanitarian assistance, with more than 900 communities likely affected. The World Health Organization has estimated that some 310,000 people have been affected at the quake's epicenter in Donggala Regency, along with 350,000 in neighboring Palu. The road to recovery will be long. Hundreds of schools and tens of thousands of homes will have to be patched up for rebuilt, a task made more difficult by more than 360 aftershocks.
All right, Iglesia Ni Cristo's Aid for Humanity continues all over the world, and this time in Winnipeg, Canada. The Aid for Humanity project around the globe provides free medical and dental consultations, medicine, clothes, and other food essentials. Our EBC correspondent is on the ground, Kathleen May Pangan. Kathleen?
Did you know that according to Statistics Canada, Manitoba has one of the highest poverty rates in Canada? The 2015-2016 Manitoba Annual Rate Report says in 2014, 232,480 economic families in the province were living in poverty. Manitoba also has the highest rate of Indigenous children living in the poverty in the country. According to Manitoba Annual Report, children in Manitoba experienced particularly high poverty rates. For example, in 2014, 1 in 3.5 children, or 85,110 children, were living in poverty in the province. Because of this, through the Aid of Humanity project of the Felix Y. Manalo Foundation, over 3,000 care packages have been prepared to extend help to residents of Winnipeg, Canada. The Iglesia Ni Cristo and the Felix Y. Manalo Foundation are here right now at the Turtle Island Recreation Center, bringing aid to Indigenous people, refugees, and low-income families.
It's tremendous, right? They're not just walking away with a package of goods, right? You know, when you're struggling, being able to have that little package, you know, they make it last such a long time. And it's also what it does inside, right? Knowing that somebody cares for you enough to come together to give you this package, and it's just totally heartwarming.
I've never been in any other community that has more
attempts to help out these people that are marginalized.
These helps have been going on the past few hours, still going strong. Thousands of people are coming in and out, and they're being greeted so positively, and such a welcoming atmosphere. You know, the Church of Christ is just incredibly hospitable and kind, and I think that really resonates with people. They leave here feeling uplifted from the music and the joy that's radiating from people.
Reporting for Eagle News from Central Canada, I am Kathleen May Pangan, and I am 1 with 25.
All right, Eagle News International will be right back.
Health is our most important asset, and it should always be a constant effort.
In football, just a few days after Cristiano Ronaldo was accused of raping a woman in a Las Vegas hotel in 2009, the football star has been left out of the Portuguese national squad for its upcoming matches in October and November. And Nike has taken the rare step of expressing concern about one of its own athletes. Catherine Mayorga, the American former model who has accused soccer star Cristiano Ronaldo of raping her in Las Vegas hotel in 2009, decided to go public with her allegation as a result of the #MeToo movement, her lawyer said on Wednesday.
The Me Too movement and the women who have stood up and disclosed sexual assaults and publicly has given Catherine a lot of courage and has to a great extent enabled her to come forward.
In mixed martial arts, Khabib Nurmagomedov wasn't about to wait around for a tardy Conor McGregor, who arrived at what was supposed to be their final pre-fight press conference together to find the UFC lightweight champion already gone. Nurmagomedov and McGregor ended up answering questions separately, though it seemed to do a little dampen the excitement about the 155-pound showdown. The two meet Saturday night in what is expected to be the biggest fight in UFC history. A bout that might even threaten the pay-per-view sales mark set last year by McGregor when he was stopped in a boxing match by Floyd Mayweather Jr. Several thousand McGregor fans packed a theater expecting to see a confrontation between the two fighters who can stand each other. What they got instead were separate appearances, with Nurmagomedov leaving 10 minutes before McGregor, who was nearly a half-hour late, arrived. If Nurmagomedov he didn't show it. The Russian champion held court before a crowd that booed him before ending his portion of the press conference 15 minutes into it. UFC chief Dana White had to scramble to join Nurmagomedov, who stepped on the stage exactly at the appointed time for the final media event before Friday's weigh-in. But in a promotion that has largely sold itself, White wasn't terribly worried that the two fighters didn't get a chance to confront each other. McGregor is the challenger and also the underdog against the unbeaten Nurmagomedov, who won vacant UFC lightweight title in April against state replacement Ali Quinta to become the 155-pound champion. Nurmagomedov is skilled at getting his opponents down and forcing them into submission. That was the tactic Nate Diaz used to upset McGregor in their first fight, though McGregor came back to win a close decision in their second bout. And Boston point guard Kyrie Irving wants to stay with Boston Celtics if the fans and the Celtics franchise wants him. Here's EBC Sports correspondent Valerie Gonzalez for the report.
Boston point guard Kyrie Irving says he intends to re-sign with the Celtics next summer. At a fan event at TD Garden on Thursday, Irving told the crowd, "If you guys will have me back, I plan on re-signing here." Irving signed a 5-year, $94 million deal with Cleveland prior to the 2015-16 season, but asked for a trade last summer. He has a player option for the next season and can become an unrestricted free agent in 2020. Despite injuries to Irving and top free agent Gordon Hayward, the Celtics finished with the best record in the Eastern Conference last season before losing to the Cleveland Cavaliers in the conference finals in 7 games. For EN Sports, this is Valerie Gonzalez. I am one with 25.
Thank you, Val. And these are the stories for EN Sports. I'm Ben Bernaldez, and I am one with 25.
All right, in preparation for the forthcoming District Unity Games, congregations of Macau recently held their inter-area unity games. Sports enthusiasts and from different areas of the local congregations had a competition in various sports events such as basketball, volleyball, and other competitions. Kit Wong from our EBC Macau Bureau is on the ground.
Today is a National Day of Chila, and members of the Church of Christ marked their first unity games for their newly established district, the District of Macau. Truly, for the brethren, their holiday was meaningful when they took part in this recreational activity launched by the church administration. Through this activity, the brethren not only have had fun, but also the brethren's love for one another and their unity have even more strengthened.
Ngayon po dito sa Macau ay National Day po ng China. Kaya ginawa na po namin na magkaroon kami ng first Unity Games dito po sa newly established na district, ang Ecclesiastical District po ng Macau.
Isang buwan ang pinaghandaan naming pagpapractice po nito sa lahat ng malarangan, kagaya po ng basketball, volleyball, chess. Sa lokal po ng Taipa, pinaghandaan po namin ito.
Masaya, nagaganap po ngayon ang Unity Games namin na napakasaya po at dahil nagkabuklod-buklod po kami muli na magkakapatid at nagbibigay kaligayahan po sa amin. Dahil minsan lang po mangyari ang ganito kaya napakasaya po.
Ipinabot po namin sa ating tagapamahalang pangkalahatan na nagpapasalamat kami ng marami at kami po ay nangangako na patuloy kami na makikipagkaisa sa lalong ikasisigla po ng mga kapatid dito po sa aming distrito. Maraming salamat po sa inyo kapatid na Eduardo B. Manalo sa inyong pagmamahal at pagmamalasakit po sa aming kapakanan.
I am one with 25 and I am one with EPA.
From Macau, reporting for Eagle News, I am Kit Wong and I am one with 25.
Thank you, Kit.
Thank you, Kit. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also check out our boards and Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Zepeda. Thanks for joining us.
All right, and I'd like to greet our former correspondent, Mr. Celso Donor. A very happy birthday.
Happy birthday,
his Kuya, Kuya Yohong Donor. I think that's the name.
Happy birthday din po.
Happy birthday to you. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles, and we're one with 25.